Yeah, and by movement progressions, you're talking about difficulty of movement or actually changing the movements as you go along.
Just increasing the complexity of a movement pattern. So, starting with a kneeling push up to like a regular push up to like a ring push up. That's a simple, easy example of like a
Hmm.
movement progression.
Yeah, so my general thought with that is I will take a set pattern
Hmm.
and then I will either, I got this from Brian Grasso. He said, if you're a really good trainer, you should take all the basic exercises you want clients to do, and you should know at least 3 to 5 regressions and progressions,
Sure.
right? So 3 to 5 ways to make it harder, 3 to 5 ways to make it easier. So I'm a big fan of that. So for example, for the push-up, my preference is I like the stability that the push-up allows. So for women, I call them, hey, we're going to do some moving planks today, right? Because they're all convinced I got to do more planks. It's right. Oh, look, it's a push-up. Oh, crap. But I can't do a push-up. So I'm like, okay, so my next thought is I want that pattern. I want them to stabilize in an elongated position. But if they don't have the strength to do it, now I want to find a way to deload it. So what
Right.
I'll do is I'll bring their hands up, right?
Sure.
So have
Change
them
the
go to a
angle.
bar, go to a bench, go to the stairs in their house, that type of thing. For progressions, I always look at easier things that are to do. Back squats are usually like the last thing I ever teach anyone. For God knows whatever reason, putting a bar on somebody's back and having them squat for the average person, it's usually a debacle. But I can have them do like the Dan John, do a goblet squat, sometimes even a front squat, hold the sandbag, hold their kid, whatever. It doesn't matter. Some type of implement. And if I shift the load to more of the front, that makes it a lot easier because that now works as a counterbalance. So I usually like to look at what exercises can the average person get the most load doing. So deadlift, squat, push up, press, weighted carries, basic sort of fundamental human movements. They also allow a fair amount of load, right? The average person can deadlift way more than they can do a one-arm preacher curl, right?
Right.
So if fat loss is their goal, how many more calories are they going to burn doing a deadlift? How much more muscle are they going to activate? It's going to carry over a lot more to what they do in everyday life, right? People bend down and pick stuff up all the time. So then I'll have different ways of loading that to make it easier. So for some people, it may be a kettlebell, stacked on a bunch of taped phone books, right?
Right.
Because they
Right.
don't have the mobility to get to the ground. Perfectly fine. It may be a rack deadlift. It may be even a Jefferson deadlift. So now they're at an off-axis type thing. It just depends on their movement and where they start. But my preference is to do basic exercises because they're basic movements and you have the ability to load them actually heavier relative to other exercises they could do.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds just like you're progressing and regressing the motor patterns based on where that person's coming in terms of their actual movement like skills, right?
Yep, and most of that is gross defined movements, right?
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, that's how the human body, from a neurological standpoint, learns, right? If you watch kids, right, kids are very good at learning crawling patterns before they run,
Right.
right? So run would be a little bit more of a finer movement pattern than crawling,
Sure.
right? So I always like people to start, what are the gross motor movements? And then if you make them finer and more intricate over time, you eventually end up with some very high level, sporting athletic type things. I think that's a good progression instead of trying to start very fine and then making them more gross based. I think gross movements and then refining them over time is faster progress.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. You mentioned something a couple minutes ago, and you said, taking your push-ups and altering the angle to make them easier. You also mentioned, doing a deadlift to a stack of tape phone books, so reducing the range of motion. I just wanted to touch on that real quick because I don't see a lot of people using range of motion progressions or angled progressions in their training. And to me, I've used that for years, and it's one of the most powerful ways to get results fast because on the angle, it's like all you got to do is lower it by an inch. On the range of motion, all you got to do is lower it by an inch. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that because it's a really good key point that you made there.
Yeah, and then a lot of the people, I don't think it's a fair assessment to say, okay, person comes in and they say, okay, we're going to do squats today. How can you? I mean, I remember the first time I ever taught someone a squat. When I first started, I'm like, okay, yeah, come in, squat down to this, and I remember calling people on the phone, going, I can't get this person to squat. I suck. I don't know what's going on. They're not doing it. They look horrible. And I knew enough at that point to know that they have to know how to do it somewhat. So I think what I found was, what's the movement pattern I want to do? And literally the question you have to ask yourself is, if they can't do that, how do I make it easier?
Right.
It's literally that simple of a question. And the easiest way is normally just to decrease the range of motion.
Right.
Right. So I want to do quality before I ever want to add quantity. So if you can only squat, this far down to a super high box holding onto something without pain, and that's all you can do at that point, cool. That's where we start, right?
Right.
And then over time, can you go a little bit further? Can you hold on a little bit less? Just sort of progress it over time. So my preference is to go more towards a full range of motion initially, and then once I get that, then I'll go back and add a little bit more load to it at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. I couldn't agree more with all that stuff. You mentioned in the beginning of this using biofeedback and heart rate variability. We had David Delanave on the call. He talked a lot about
Cool.
Biofeedback training and stuff.
Yeah.
But I'd like to dig into more with heart rate variability. I've been using the BioForce HRV now for a handful of months, and I actually enjoy it. So maybe you can give people kind of an idea on how you use bio or heart rate variability, and let's maybe start with, what is heart rate variability, and how can that help you with your training?
Yeah. The cool part is that I initially got into heart rate variability about 7 years ago. So I was in the physiology department. I told you I ran running and screaming from the biomed department because I had a ton of math and I didn't want anything else to do with math anymore. So literally the first day I sit down in the meeting, an advisor looks, he goes, yeah, I've got two projects. They're on metabolic flexibility and they're on heart rate variability, and they both involve a heavy amount of math. He looks around the room and points at me and goes, hey, you're the math wizard from the other department. These are now your projects. And I go, oh, crap, I don't want anything to do with math. But what it turns out is that the math allows heart rate variability to determine some very cool things. So if you look at the autonomic nervous system, it's just part of your nervous system. We don't need to get into the details of it. But it splits into two branches. So one is the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest branch. The other one is the sympathetic, which is the old fight or flight, freeze or faint potentially. I guess there's actually a goat that under high stress just like faints, right? So it's a response to stress, but it's usually fight or flight. And heart rate variability gives us an idea of the mix of those two branches of the nervous system. And what people miss is that you want both of them to be balanced, right? If you become highly, highly parasympathetic, right, rest and digest, that can actually happen in advanced stages of overtraining. You will feel like dog poo. You'll be laying on your couch, drooling on yourself, getting almost nothing done.
Right.
But if you go too far onto the sympathetic side, your body has this fight or flight response all the time. It's trying to resolve all this stress, and that's not really good either. So you want a balance of the two. And heart rate variability is a way that will tell you that balance. So whether you use the BioForce one, I use the iFleet one, on that scale, they both equate to a 0 to 100 scale. And the higher on that scale, the more parasympathetic you are, the more rest and digest. So if you're looking at it in the morning, you get up and you do your number, and you're averaging, let's say, 70, and you see today you're at 74, it's probably a pretty good day. I get away doing some more sympathetic driven things because I'm very parasympathetic right now. Maybe we'll do some more strength training. Maybe I'll ramp up the stress a little bit. If you get the opposite and you look and you go, holy crap, today it's like 58. Well, maybe today is not the best day to go pound the crap out of myself in the gym, right?
Right.
I'm adding more stress to a system that's getting pretty close to being maxed out on stress. The really nice part is that these apps now are, a few $100. The equipment that I had in the lab to run it, a few years ago was several $1,000s easy. I think it was like $5,000 to $8,000 to do the equipment. So now you can get for a couple $100 something on your smartphone that is very accurate, doesn't take very long. And what I found is that it's generally very useful. The two caveats I will give is that you have to do the measurement in the exact same manner every single day that you use it, because heart rate variability is affected by all sorts of stuff. That's both good, that's both bad. It means that it's sensitive enough to show changes, but you have to be able to replicate it in the same way every time. So I have people do it first thing in the morning. If you need to go run to the bathroom, go run to the bathroom, come back, lay down, put the strap on. Depending on the system, like for Bioforce, it's equated to a megawave, so they do it laying down. Some of the iFleet stuff is done in a seated position, but it's the same way each time, so that the number is reproducible. And then the second part is what I found over time. So I've got my own data for almost 2.5 years now, well over 2 years.
That's huge.
I got some data. It worked so well that I actually had all my online clients switched over probably 4 or 5 months ago now. So I just include it as part of their package. Well, I'll buy you the darn software. Just go do it because I think the data is that useful.
Right.
So you want to look at about what the average is. So if you're using Joel's system, he's got a lot of metrics that allow you to do that, and not quite as much at the daily number. So if you look at the overall trend and it's doing this, that means you're headed in the wrong direction, right? You have too much stress your body can't recover from at a nervous system level. If it's even or kind of gradually going up, hey, that means you're doing okay. You have enough stress, your body's able to recover from that, and then you're doing okay. So I like to look at the daily number, and then what is their trend? Are you simply going down? Are you even, or are you slightly going up?
Yeah, that's so cool. It's such a cool tool. You guys really should go check that out. It's like you said, it's not very much, a couple $100, and you can get something that will basically tell you whether you're ready to go out there and kill it, whether you should go do a little strength training and go for a walk, or whether you should take a nap. And it's so simple and it's so effective. And I think it's definitely the wave of the future with training. You mentioned something there, so I'm going to get a little greedy and ask my own question.
Yeah.
You mentioned parasympathetic overtraining. And so from what I understand, that's when you go so far on that sympathetic side that your body basically hijacks your nervous system and goes, this guy needs rest, and brings you all the way back over to the other side. How would an HRV tool tell you that? Because wouldn't you be rating high on the HRV scale, but also being in a parasympathetic overtraining state?